In today's video, we'll be breaking down all of the major statistics regarding the month of September in Bitcoin's history and then relating that to Q4 of this year, 2025. And there are major implications even for tonight's closure for September, because this is going to wrap up not just September's closure, but also the third quarter. So major implications to come. We're only going to be focused on the higher term timeframes for this video, but we'll start it off with a revisiting of the daily price statistics. In fact, I think that this is very much relevant right now, as we do see that Tuesday is, again, more or less a coin flip probability and whether it's likely to close positively or negatively since this bull market began in 2023. However, the average gain and the average loss are actually staring us right in the face right now, as Bitcoin has put in a wick pretty much around that average percent loss for Tuesdays. In this case, that would be an average price of around 112,450 or so. And you can see that Bitcoin is having a nice little bounce from that area already. So ultimately, if you have been using this indicator to have those intraday scalps, just be aware that, the first pass is the really high probability to get, in this case, a bounce off of our lower boundary. The second pass, less so. But as you do probably remember from yesterday's video, we were looking for a move up to the top side of that average return range high, which was just under 115. And what do you know? Bitcoin pulled back on that first pass exactly from there. So beautifully done yet again. If you are using this indicator to scalp, more power to you. It's available for you for free for 7 days in the Caretakers Indicator Suite, which is available in the link in the description below for Teachable. All right, let's get into the fun stuff now. It's time for some October nerdy statistics. And what I've done here is I've gone through each and every past October in Bitcoin's history. And yes, indeed, October is actually one of the best months for Bitcoin. It's among the best months for Bitcoin, especially when you consider both the likelihood for October to be a positive closing month and then also the returns on average for October. It is certainly among the best months historically for Bitcoin. And what I've done is I've measured all of the major statistics throughout the history of Bitcoin's history, if that's not redundant enough, and recorded them over here. And I just want to go over the top line statistics right out the get-go, and then we'll get into the fun, nerdy stuff, which I think is a lot more relevant, honestly, especially if you're trying to create a bit of a plan. And we'll go over kind of, at least what I'd be looking for if I wanted to invest a little bit more into the old coins for this month, or for this upcoming month, I should say, of October. Anyways, out of 15 prior Octobers in Bitcoin's history, 11 of those have been positive from open to closure, and that would give it about a 73.333333, repeating, of course, probability to be a positive closing month. And I do also want to add that the past 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 Octobers have actually been very much positive for Bitcoin, with some pretty heavy returns there as well, pretty heavily impressive returns, I would say. Of note, several more than at least 2 digits percentage, but even then, we have 3 of them that are close to 30%, or even one that is above 30%, just at 40% right here. That was about 4 years ago to this date. So ultimately, this is not just a very likely month to close positively, but when it does close positive, it's usually a big gaining month, with the average return for the positive closing Octobers has been just under 27%. The median is actually slightly higher than that at 28 and third percent right there. So that is actually a little bit uncharacteristic of prior months, especially, and ultimately that would be a major gain for Bitcoin. We'll go over what that would look like on top of price action a little bit later, but I also do want to cover the loss on average if we do see a loss, which I should add, again, the last time we saw a loss was back in 2018. And I will say Bitcoin only lost 3 and about 3/3%, which is very small for Bitcoin. In crypto terms, very small. In traditional markets terms, very fucking massive, very fucking girthy. That would be rather nasty. Anyways, in this case, we can look at an average loss return of about 8.5%. The median actually slightly higher than that as well, at 9 1/3 as well. So let's just look at what that would essentially account to on price action. I do want to add that the average win return is again going to be about 27%. So we're going to take it from about where Bitcoin's at right now. So understand, this video is being recorded intraday here. It really does depend where Bitcoin will close later today. And of course, I want to add that there is an event today. You got the government potential shutdown, probably won't shut down, but of course games are played around a date like this, and naturally, we'll likely see markets move. So I'm going to assume Bitcoin closes where it's at right now. It probably won't, but let's just assume for argument's sake, and we'll do the positive side first, about 27%. And that would put Bitcoin again on average somewhere around $144,000, which is not bad. Hey, I'm not fucking complaining on that one, man. But But again, that is an average. There's going to be some variance around that. But I should add that in the past 6 years, the lowest positive return we actually saw was back here about 3 years ago, and that was 5.5%. So even that, would be rather welcome on top of current price action. That probably puts Bitcoin at about 120 or a little bit above 120 if that were to play out on the lower end. Now, on the other side, if Bitcoin does close a negative October, which, is quite rare, but it definitely does happen, what would effectively like 9% to the downside look like? Again, assuming Bitcoin closed somewhere around here, which is a big assumption, that would put Bitcoin at around 103 or so. We'll come back to these numbers a little bit later, but they will hold some relevancy, throughout this month, and of course later on in this video as well. Now, getting back into the data right here, I want to go over some of the more, I guess, in my opinion, relevant statistics. Now, speaking directly to, if I was going to buy some Bitcoins in the month of October, when would I do it? When would be a good day to do that? And generally speaking, for Bitcoin in October, the lows come relatively early within the month. Now, when I bifurcate this data between positive and negative closing Octobers, we do see that on the positive closing Octobers, the average date of the low of the month is about the end of the first week. And I do want to add that this one's a little bit later than most positive closing months data. And of course, the only time we've really even seen it get the low outside of the first couple weeks was once in 2019, where it happened on the 23rd day of October. Other than that, it's been about around the end of the first week, let's say. So we'd still be waiting around, if you're looking to buy literally on the first day of October. I mean, it might not be the worst of all time, but ultimately the low, unlikely to come in on the first day. It's likely to come in closer to the end of the first week. On the other side, for negative closing Octobers, well, that typically comes in a little bit later, in fact, closer to the end of the second week. Again, this data is slightly different than what we do typically experience on negative closing month data, which usually comes in around the third or 3.5 weeks into the month. This one coming in significantly earlier, but I do want to acknowledge that there is a significant lack of data here. It's just what we got. This is just, what we're working with when it comes to Bitcoin. Obviously, over time, we will get more and more and more. Anyways, I do need a request in the background. Elsa, stop fucking typing. It's very annoying. Anyway, I'm having trouble keeping my train of thought here. Anyways, yes. So if I'm talking about when I'm looking for the low of the month, probably around the end of the first week. So I'm not really in a rush to buy or anything like that. If I do want to buy for the month of October, and then of course I want to go over what do we typically expect for the low of the month pertaining to actual price. And for that, I've gone ahead and measured all of the prior Octobers in Bitcoin's history and measured from the open of the month to the low of the month. So we're not talking about the open to the close, which is completely different. We're talking about the open to the low of the month. And then I've also bifurcated this data by positive and negative closing Octobers as well. And what I found is that for positive closing Octobers, again, even if they are positive closing, which on average returns 27%, pretty fucking big, still the differential between the open and the low of the month is about 6%. Now, let's actually draw a meeting on this as well. I actually didn't put this in here, but I'm genuinely curious what it's going to spit back out. So let's see what this one's going to be. And that would actually be about 4%. So 4%, still relatively close to that. And again, I'm going to assume Bitcoin closes out September somewhere around here. Again, that can very well change in the next 9 hours, 39 minutes, and 41 seconds when Bitcoin does officially close. But if we were to shave off about 6% to the downside from here, where would that put Bitcoin? About 106. So we're starting to see that, low $100,000 number continue to come back in place. We're going to also relate it to another thing a little bit later as well. So keep that one in the back of your mind's eye. And I do want to also acknowledge that even the last October that we did see in 2024, which was massively gaining by the end of October, did still see about a 7% decline between the open and the low of that month. Again, putting in the low of the month relatively early. Relatively early on the 9th day. I was like, wait, where the fuck is the data? No, I'm looking at the wrong one. Yes, there we go. It's on the 9th. So again, about the end of the first week, that obviously on the 9th day of October would be closer to, I guess, a week and a half, if you will. So yeah, even if you are going to be positive in October, still, there's usually a little bit of downside. And it's been quite some time since we've even seen, less than a 1% move to the downside. That last time we saw that was 2016 and 2015, respectively. Those were the lowest times that we've ever seen, a differential between the open and the low of the month. So a very, very long time ago. I mean, quite literally, about 10 years ago. On the other side, for negative close in Octobers, it's much, 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 much nastier. Like, get ready for the fucking Bearzuka dildo in your face, because that would be an average differential of about almost 30%. Obviously, that would massively change this. Again, there is a significant lack of data here for the negative closing side. But again, assuming Bitcoin closed somewhere around here, 30% to the downside would more or less put Bitcoin at the April lows, or close to the April lows, a smidgen below about $80,000. So that'd be quite the differential here. In my opinion, if we saw something like that, it's probably indicative of, this whole market cycle likely coming to a conclusion a lot sooner rather than later. I'll put it that way. So a lot of this really does hinge upon Bitcoin's ability to continue to remain in a more bullish state. And what I will say here is that there is good reason to believe that Bitcoin will be bullish in October. Why? Because anytime that we have seen September close green, which is not that often, although the last 3 years, including this year, very likely are going to be green. Q4 of that year has gone on to be positive every fucking time. Now, I mean Q4, so that means the time between October all the way to the end of December. That doesn't mean every fucking day is going to be green during that time, but if we were to look at the open of October versus the close of December, yeah, that would very likely be positive. And I don't like going against stats that are 100%. In this case, this one is so far unfazed by this. And I do want to add over here that the average win return for these is very high. It's about 170%. The median win return is about 70%. I do want to acknowledge, however, that both in 2013 and 2010, we saw really outsized returns for Q4, 400% or more. I think that these are probably not relevant or relatable to the current data Bitcoin. You can see the more recent times, still pretty fucking impressive, to be honest, but significantly less than 400%. We're talking about 47.5 for last year, 56.77 for the year prior, and then 59.17 for the year prior to that. That was a green September, which was 2016. So yeah, a lot of things adding up right there. Again, if I were to get rid of these outliers, that'd probably bring our average closer to, about 50%. So again, if Bitcoin were to close somewhere around here, big if, but if it were to, then let's just add about 50% to current price action, get an idea of kind of what we could potentially be looking at. And that would be somewhere around like $175,000 as of current price, or it would be a little bit lower than that because I just did 54%. But so let's just say 170. Again, these are averages. We have limited data, but it's the best that we can do with the data that we do have. So putting all these puzzle pieces together, if I am going to be biased towards a positive closing in October, which I very likely will be, assuming today closes positively, which will be if Bitcoin closed anywhere above about 109, then I am looking generally for the low of October to be probably around the end of the first week, day number 7, 8, 9, 10, somewhere around there. I think is high probability. If it starts to drag on further than that, likely something else is going on. That's also a good signal in and of itself that Bitcoin probably going to be red and maybe something new is happening. Very possible, of course. But like I said, on this channel, we focus on statistics. If you don't understand that, then I don't know what the fuck you're doing here, to be honest. Like, you're just going to be confused and probably very unhappy, or yeah. I don't know. That's up to you. Hey, more power to you. I guess it's free to do. But yeah. And then of course, I still would be looking for a little bit of downside in October, likely during that first week. And, low 100s does make a lot of sense for many reasons. We will expand upon this in a moment here. I want to bring back this setup that we've been looking at several times in the past. I mean, it seems like the past couple of months now, because we've seen so many of these fire off. The 4-day time frame fired off recently, where we had the 4-day red moving average crossing the downside of the yellow moving average, which has begotten a minimum test down to the green moving average for the past 8 years, perfectly every fucking time. Not always profitable in this manner. Again, this is not a trade setup. Like, for fuck's sake, holy shit. There's people that I see on this channel, sorry, not on this channel, but like sometimes talking in the comments or on Discord, who look at this as like a setup. You are going to be very, very, very disappointed if you play this as a setup. I hope that I'm absolutely 1 million abundantly % clear about this, because holy shit, I've said it, I feel like, a million times. So I'll say it for the millionth and first time. This is not in any way, shape, or form a good trading strategy, although it actually has been profitable here, to be fair. But it is really, really useful for general directional analysis on YouTube. That is the purpose of it. That's why I use it. I would not recommend actually trading this as a strategy. Anyways, the reason why I pointed out is because that green moving average, which is the 55 EMA, is all the way down here at guess where? 105 and change. And again, that's a minimum corrective target. So it's very much in alignment with the stats that we looked at over here pertaining to October lows. And it's very much in alignment with the data that we looked at earlier as well. Which I'm having trouble bringing up on my screen. So we'll just go on to the next point. Anyways, this setup can very easily bleed into the 5-day setup, which is not quite there just yet. It will if Bitcoin starts to close the next period or two below about $112,000. But right now, as long as Bitcoin's above $112,000, the 5-day time frame is not in jeopardy of getting that same signal, which would have a slightly lower target to about $102,500. Now, realistically, that's not that much further down, and it does kind of give us, a area of interest more or less between 105 to 102, basically just low 100s is kind of what I'd be looking for. Because again, these are averages; they are not guaranteed or anything like that. And again, I'm just using the quant prime service to back to right here. It makes everything super streamlined, super easy to do. And so I'm just going through the motions of essentially defining like which one is firing off next. So you can see how the dominoes may fall. If that is going to happen, like I said, first week or two of October, very, very likely if it's going to happen at all, and looking somewhere down around here, maybe a wick a little bit lower as well. Again, that is a minimum target. We have seen it overshot many times, but at least somewhere down around there. But if you see, a shot down around there, around the end of the first week of October, I think that's in my opinion, that would be good enough for me. That would be good enough for me if I'm looking for, long-term investing type positions, or at least, something to put something on basically. Anyways, moving on from there, and let me get back into my notes because I keep on evading them. Yes, there we go. That's what I wanted to get into next. So also, because we are going to be wrapping up the quarter today, meaning that the end of Q3 is upon us, well, I do want to revisit the quarterly chart. And the quarterly chart has been super useful for one major reason, and that is because it has had a nice behavior, very long term, of reconnecting with this red moving average on just about each and every closure throughout Bitcoin's history. Anytime that it does not reconnect with it on a current closure, Bitcoin generally trades sideways until it does. I'll give you an example more recently right here. Bitcoin disconnects from the low to the actual moving average right here. And then, of course, the next quarter, you get a nice stab down there, reconnects, and then Bitcoin continues with the upwards green dildo party. Same shit over here, disconnects right here, reconnects over here, and then boom, nice move to the upside. And then same thing over here, disconnects to the upside, then reconnects over here, and then big reversal to the downside. Anyways, the reason why I'm pointing it out right now is because Bitcoin has disconnected with that major moving average for this quarter as of right now. And unless a Bitcoin drops another almost $20,000 before end of day, which actually would be pretty crazy even for Bitcoin in my opinion. But hey, I guess anything is possible. I would say it's unlikely right now. Then we will not have a reconnect for this quarter, meaning that I would be very strongly biased to at some point look for a reconnect in Q4 of this year. Likely, if Q4 is going to be bullish, then we very likely expect that to happen early on within Q4, probably in October. And as we know, October generally, even for positive closing Octobers, does like to go down into the end of the first week of October. So as of right now, and this will absolutely 100% change when we get the new open, the red 5 EMA here is about $94,000. When we get the new quarterly open, I'm going to guesstimate right now. So this is not going to be exact, but I'm going to guesstimate that we're going to see that red moving average rise up all the way to probably about $100,000. So Bitcoin would only need to go down somewhere around there to open up Q4, fulfill that condition, and then hopefully, for the Boo Law's sake, continue to march its way upwards and onwards. That would be absolutely beautiful. We love that very, very much for the Bitcoin Boo Laws. But time shall tell. I got another 9.5 hours left to go. Anyways, that is all, like I said, going to be confluent with this setup over here and also the stats that we looked at over here. So a lot of these things work hand in hand together. They're all kind of outlining the same area of interest if you do want to look for kind of a bullish dump, if you will, which, is usually kind of like a funny thing to say. But in this case, I actually would look at it as such. Anyways, moving on from there, I just wanted to go over the HPDR here as well. Of course, the HPDR, we did look at the biweekly time frame as opening below the median as significant to open up this next 2-week period, which just ended last week. So we got a new fresh one as of this week. And we outlined this as an area of interest for an early week rally into the end of September on yesterday's video. And Bitcoin more or less kind of already got there. You know, it was about 115 or so. Bitcoin already wicked up there. So I do still look at the general range over these next couple of weeks between the median and the bottom side of the 38.2 level. And guess where the bottom side of the 38.2 level is? About 101 to 102 region. So Bitcoin did get down around there. There's a lot of reason to at least be looking for a nice big old bounce and perhaps even a reversal into, you know, the general uptrend, which would be very, very nice. So we shall see. Of course, this picture is always evolving. And as always, I reserve the absolute right to change my opinion at the drop of a dime due to new information. And it is what it is. It is what it is. But yeah, that's pretty much going to do it for me today. I hope I didn't bore you too much with these damn statistics, but I do think that they are very much relevant right now. I actually do want to check out the monthly here as well. Might as well. I'm curious to see what this one updates to at the beginning of October. But right now, that 38.2 level actually just sunk all the way down to about $93,000. But that will very likely change upon October's open. That'll hopefully come up to about $100,000, adding even more pressure towards, or even more relevance to that number. So fair enough. I think that's where we're going to leave it for today's video. Ultimately, if you do want to be bullish and not be looking for any sort of a pullback in October, there is always a possibility of that. But for me, it will be the same thing as what we spoke about over the past week, which is Bitcoin absolutely must trade back above the Wednesday, September 17th high of about 118,000 US dollars. Bitcoin can do that. You're just going to hear me turn into a massive fucking arrogant bull, I suppose. But until that happens, you know, I'm generally favoring still a sideways and downside correction here, with a very likely bullish twist in Q4 of this year. So other than that, I think I'll sign off on that note. We'll be back on with another live stream analysis tomorrow. And with that said, I'd like to wish you the best. Take care, much love, and see you hopefully Wednesday.